What's up, guys? This is Toad. It's Better Off Dead. College football, week 4. Shit's flying by already, and I got 3 more plays that I'm going to talk about. I was almost like thinking I'm going to force like a 4th play because I'm like, man, the season's picking up now. We got more competitive action. Usually I feel like I'm like really consistently at like 4 plays a week, but what are you going to do? Maybe I'll throw out some additional leans as I go, or at the end of the video, I guess. But 3 that I think are like the strongest plays this week. I'll get into those. First, I don't know if I have any ranting to do as far as last week is concerned. I went 2-1 on the college football show and 2-1 on the NFL show last week, so not too bad. I'll take it. The bets that I lost, East Carolina, the one that I lost in college football, I thought it was the right side. Obviously, I thought it was the right side, but it looked like it was the right side. Late into the game, I think they were winning the game by 1, like pretty late, and just did not work out that way. They wound up giving up 14 straight points, like really late in the game, the last like several minutes of the game or something, to take what could have been a possible underdog money line cash. It looked like that might be the case, and just flip that completely around and not even cover the 8.5 and lose by multiple scores. So that's just fucking great. Thank you to East Carolina, but I did get the other 2 right. Let's get into this shit here. So all the games I'm going to be talking about are actually being played simultaneously. Somehow it just works out this way. I have no afternoon slate games. I don't have anything tomorrow night or Friday, although I might throw out some like leans if I do like daily videos there. I don't really have strong opinions on the Thursday or the Friday games this week, really. Saturday, the 3 games are all at like 7 p.m., 7:30 p.m. First one I'm going to be looking at is going to be, what is it? Middle Tennessee, -3. That's going to be the first one I'm going to be looking at here. And if we look at what's going on in the market here for Middle Tennessee, you guys, if you know how I bet by now, you might know why I'm on this. This is like, you could project, you could just predict that I would be on Middle Tennessee this week. If you look here, it looks like there is a lot of the money is certainly on Middle Tennessee, but this is going to be a small action game, probably a game that doesn't draw that much action. You got 70% of the tickets, according to my pregame numbers here, at least. Which there are some other sites that probably have like more volume on this, so their numbers are a little bit more accurate, maybe. But this tends to work out pretty well for me, so I'm continuing to do it. 70% of the tickets, but 82% of the money on Middle Tennessee. And the reason why I think this is such a strong play, even though there's so much money on it, the books are probably going to actually potentially need Colorado State to cover in this game. But the reason why I like Middle Tennessee so much in this game, you might already know what I'm going to say. Colorado State last week, everybody saw what they did. This is probably going to be the best play on the board this week, the Middle Tennessee play. Colorado State, they're in one of the worst spots of the week, one of the worst situations that you could be in. What happened to them last week? They were College Game Day, I believe, was there at Colorado State, and if I'm not mistaken, it was the big rivalry game. Colorado's been like the massive hyped team, just completely overhyped in my opinion, just incredibly hyped all week, the first couple weeks of the season since they beat TCU. It's just been ridiculous. It's all anybody's been talking about. ESPN seemed like they were just covering Colorado all week, possibly because game day was there. Like, it seemed like every time I turned it on, it was just, we're talking about Colorado, we're talking about Coach prime time, whatever. And then, of course, what happened, Colorado was a 23.5 point favorite, came in and didn't look that great, really. Colorado State came to play, and of course, Colorado State was extra motivated in that one, because not only is Colorado just incredibly hyped, but Colorado State's like the little in-state little brother there, so they get that like a little bit extra motivation there. And we've reached the point where Colorado's they're the bigger school, but they're the better of the 2 football schools right now in the state of Colorado, so Colorado State was definitely motivated. But not only that, but Colorado State played a very good game. Not only played it close, but they were winning that game late, and they should have won that game. They were winning that game by 11 with a few minutes left maybe in that game, and it just all went away, man. Colorado, they were able to get a field goal and a touchdown and 2-point conversion. I think they may have literally tied the game right on the last play, sending it into overtime. Colorado State was able to take them into double overtime and then finally succumbed and lost. And after a game like that, I mean, you're a huge underdog. It's a huge game. You have your big rival that's most hyped team in college football. You have them on the ropes. Looks like you're going to win the game, and it goes from that to having to play overtimes, extra time, and you come away in defeat. This is just not a good spot for a college football team to be in. These are young guys. It's like you go through something like that. How do you get up off the mat? And you get up off the mat, and you have to go on the road and play Middle Tennessee. Like, is Colorado State really going to be excited to play Middle Tennessee? I mean, they are still looking for their first win, but really? And then Colorado State, not next week, but in 2 weeks, they start conference play against Utah State, which is going to be a bigger game than this too, although they have Utah Tech next week, who's like just a cupcake, so I don't know if that game really matters that much. You can kind of just exclude that game from the schedule, really, I would say. But this is really about Colorado State being in a massive hangover situation here. And Middle Tennessee, I mean, nobody's going to think anything of Middle Tennessee here. Like, what have they done? They lost a couple of games, but they lost a couple of games to pretty good teams. I mean, Alabama's good, even though they might be down a little bit this year. I mean, there's no shame in losing to Alabama. They lost to Missouri in a pretty close game. Missouri looks like they might be a competitive team, and I'll be talking about them in a little bit. But yeah, Middle Tennessee, nobody's going to really be looking at them. They beat Murray State last week, who's a cupcake, who I think is an FCS team. Nobody's going to care about that. But I think this is going to be a bigger game for them, at least, because they have a bigger conference team coming into their house here to play them. So just everything lines up here. The play is Middle Tennessee State -3. I think it's a bargain, really. It's a low line there, a low spread. Middle Tennessee, I think, is the better of the two teams very slightly, so they should probably be laying a little bit more than that. But people are going to look at what they saw, see Colorado State almost beat that great Colorado team. That's what the perception is going to be. So people are going to think, well, they should beat Middle Tennessee, right? Much worse team. I don't think so. After that, and then having to travel on the road, this is just an awful spot for Colorado State. So Middle Tennessee State is going to be the play in that one. The next one, and there might be market disagreement with me on this next one, Mississippi State +6.5, and this line has gone up from, I think, what was it, at 3 or something like that. Or 4.5, I guess. And you can see here, South Carolina, at least in these books here, have 89% of the money, but only 83% of the tickets. When you see something that's that like lopsided like that for both of those, it's kind of just like, I think South Carolina is just kind of a public team, so I'm not really that opposed to just going against them. But what we got going on here, in this case, is that South Carolina, I think, is really not in a good spot here. And if you saw what they did last week, they kind of took Georgia to the limit, man, even though I don't think it really felt to anybody like Georgia was actually going to lose that game. But that was a game where South Carolina, I believe, was winning the game at the half. And I think it was on the road at Georgia, too. And Georgia, the number 1 ranked team. And the fans are actually booing Georgia going into the half, down by like 4 points or a few points or whatever it was. It was kind of a weird situation for Georgia. And maybe Georgia is not quite as good as they have been in past recent years. But South Carolina, man, that was a big game for South Carolina. They were a big underdog in that game. I think they must have been like a 24-point underdog or something like that. And they played them tough, man. They were still winning the game in the third quarter, and they were within a score deep into the game. Into the fourth quarter, they were down, I think, 3. It was still a 3-point game. Low-scoring game. It was almost like they took Georgia, like almost to the wire. And at least mentally, even though as a fan, you're probably like, yeah, Georgia's still going to win this game, even though they really just don't look like they even showed up. But South Carolina, man, for them, I think mentally they're like, we're still in this game. We think we can win this game right up until the end. So I think it's kind of a similar situation to Colorado State to what they're in. You have that big game and you almost pull off, or, mentally at least, you almost pull off this huge upset potentially, but instead you kind of fall short right at the end. I think that's going to hang over into this week. I don't think it's a good spot for South Carolina. And they have a Mississippi State team coming in who I don't think anybody's really going to be paying that much attention to. And Mississippi State last week, I think there might have been like some professionals that liked Mississippi State last week. I really didn't, just like looking at the market, mostly though because I thought that LSU has been being undervalued since their first week game where they got crushed by Florida State. Florida State's a pretty good team, but I think LSU, they are a good team, and they're being a little bit undervalued, overreaction to what they did in that week 1 game where they did not look good at all against Florida State. So LSU came in, and they went into Mississippi State last week, and they just ran them over. So now Mississippi State doesn't look very good. And Mississippi State's coming off that pretty bad, pretty ugly loss, even though it was to a really good team. They're kind of in like a bounce back spot, in my opinion. And I think they're going to be focused here, having to go play South Carolina. It's a Frank Beamer team. I mean, it's a team that is competing. They're competitive in the SEC. At least we think they will be. And South Carolina, like I said, they're coming off that just tough loss that they were hanging in that game against Georgia. And it's going to be kind of a sandwich spot because next week, South Carolina, in their next game, at least I think it's next week, they play Florida. Or no, Tennessee, I think, who's another ranked team in kind of the class of the SEC, and then Florida after that. So their next 2 games are against ranked opponents, Tennessee and Florida, big names, teams in the conference. Tennessee is quite a good team in the conference, and their only loss, I think, is to Florida right now. So South Carolina might not be paying that much attention to a Mississippi State team that just got run over. And they're coming off that game against Georgia, that tough game. So I like the fade of South Carolina here, and you could wait, I think, on this one because it's 6.5 right now. We'll say we'll play it at 6.5. I will play it at some point. I would still play it at 6.5 because, I mean, the numbers climbed up from like 4.5. But I think there is a chance that it might get to 7 here, looking at the way the numbers going. So Mississippi State plus 6.5. That's going to be that one. And then finally, one that I talked about a little bit on one of my daily videos. I think this morning I did. And unfortunately, I lost on the Miami Marlins today, which sucked. And it wasn't that close either. Just really not great on that one. But Memphis, I think this is second to Middle Tennessee as far as how good these plays are. I think this is the number 2 play of the week, Memphis. I'm going to say it's plus 6.5. I actually got it at 7 because I saw it early in the week, and I'm just like, I know I'm going to be playing Memphis here. There's no way that I'm not. And I can talk about what happened in the market a little bit. We can see here 69% of the tickets are on Missouri, 58% of the money. So kind of lopsided towards Missouri, but significantly less of the money than the tickets are on Missouri. So that's kind of telling you Missouri is like that public team, but the bigger money is fading them there. So I do like what the market is looking like on Memphis. I like that the total's going down a little bit too, and the fact that I like the underdog there. The points are just going to be worth a little bit more, maybe if you're expecting a lower scoring game. But as I was kind of alluding to on my video this morning, what we saw here in the market was, I think, a situation where the line was 7, even though it doesn't show it here. It was 7 early in the week. And, I took it when I saw it, not really thinking, but I was thinking the 7 might stick around. But I think what actually happened was, so what happens, the books will bring the number out. And a lot of times they'll bring a number out at 7 like that. That's right on a key number because they kind of want to gauge like where the action is coming in. And they really want to look at like what the professionals are betting early on. And so they'll actually limit the bets to a lower limit than what they're going to allow later in the week. So they're taking those smaller bets early, and they want to say, hey, professionals, they want to kind of take cues from those professional guys. What are they betting? And in this case, I think, because professionals will do this sometimes, I think what they were doing is they actually came in and they bet, or actually, no. So I guess, I don't know what I was going to say. I was thinking there might have been a setup where they drove it up to 7, but no, I guess that's not what happened there. Never mind. So anyway, but sometimes professionals will like bet the other side than what they're actually going to want to bet. early to try to get like a better number. So like potentially they could have bet it like up to 7, knowing that they want to take that 7, and then they'll just swoop in. And then when the limits increase a little bit after the books say, see that false move and think that they're actually on Missouri or something, they'll like have moved the number that way a little bit. But then the bettors, they just did that as a false move to drive the number a little bit higher to get that better number. And then they come in with their actual play. Once the books are allowing bigger limits, bigger plays, they'll actually come in with their real play, swoop in. But we did see the number crash down to 5.5, which I mentioned on my video earlier today, but it's climbed back up to 6.5, and you can get it at 6.5 right now, pretty sure. And there's a chance it might get back to 7. I'm still fine with taking it at 6.5 or maybe even 6, because I think it's a strong play on Memphis. And why is that? If you look at the situation here, Missouri, they're coming off a pretty big game, pretty big win. It was at home last week, and what they did is they pulled off somewhat mild upset, like a 5.5-point upset over a ranked Kansas State team. And the way they did it, it was a close game, and they won on a 61-yard field goal, I believe on the very last play as time expired. Just a crazy way to win the game on an extremely long field goal. Field goal you're not expected to make. You're probably expecting that game is going to go into overtime at that point, but they win on it. They beat a ranked team in Kansas State, a team that's known as being a good football team. They've been a good football program for a while now. Missouri, they're crowd rushed the field, and of course, living in a state whose name is misery, there's not much joy going on in the state of misery there in Missouri. So they rushed the field, man. They were really happy about that win. They're 3-0. They beat Kansas State, big win. And now what do? They play Memphis, a lower conference team that's coming in here from the American Conference. I don't think they're going to be paying that much attention to Memphis here, man. And I believe Missouri starts their SEC play, their conference play next week too, which is, even though it's against Vanderbilt, who's not really that good, but that's still like their SEC, their first conference game, which is a bigger game than I think the game against Memphis would be, even though it's a game against a 3-0 Memphis team. Memphis is not impressed this year, really. Missouri, though, they're coming off, that upset win, huge win in a really dramatic fashion on a huge, like, long field goal to win the game. And this game actually here is not on their home field. It's in St. Louis. It's actually in the Dome, the America's Center, as you can see here, where I believe the St. Louis Rams used to play. So even though it is still basically a home game for Missouri, they're not playing on their actual home field either. But they're still kind of getting like most of that home field edge and the number there. I don't think that matters that much. I think they're in a bad situation, almost a sandwich-ish, because they're playing that SEC opener next week, and they're coming off the big upset over the ranked team. Memphis, on the other hand, you look at what they did. They played Navy last, and that was actually a game that was on like primetime television, because I think it was Thursday or Friday night game last week. It was one of those two. And they did not look that good against Navy. Memphis was a big favorite in that game. They were double digits, like maybe even upwards of 2 touchdowns in that game. And as you can see, they only won that game 28-24. They barely scraped by, or at least people will look at it and say, hey, Memphis just barely got by Navy. Like, how could they do anything against Missouri here, a Missouri team that just beat ranked Kansas State? Well, Memphis, it's possible they weren't completely focused on that because they knew they were facing an SEC team in Missouri next, which is a bigger game, even though the Navy game is a primetime game. But additionally, Navy is a team that's hard to face, man, because they have a triple option offense, like the armed forces. Their football teams do that. And it's a tough type of offense to prepare for if you don't see it all the time. So that could have factored into it as well. All of that lines up to me. I like the play here quite a bit. I took it at +7 on Memphis. 6.5 I'm fine with as well. So I would say, that's going to be, that's the play there, Memphis. So to recap those, the 3 plays that I like the best: Middle Tennessee State -3, Mississippi State +6.5, Memphis +6.5, although I got it at +7. And I think that's kind of going to do it. I can throw out some other leans. Like I was kind of looking to fade South Florida because they had a game, somewhat surprisingly close game against Alabama. But Alabama is a team like they seem to not really know who their quarterback is. They came off a loss, which was a big game against Texas, so they probably just were not really that focused and not paying attention to a South Florida team that they pretty much were like, yeah, we can just get in and easily beat this team. But that final was 17-3, and people are going to look at that and think, well, South Florida like played Alabama shockingly close. It was kind of a close game, and that was a big game for South Florida. And now South Florida is hosting Rice this week, I believe, and Rice opened a pick 'em and moved up to a 2.5-point favorite in that game. And I think the consensus, from the average bettors on that is going to be like, how could a South Florida team that just played Alabama close be a home underdog against a Rice team who is just crap? Like they're Rice, like they're not a very good team. Yeah, I think that looks suspicious to me with that line. I would lean to Rice for sure. The line's up to 2.5. Anything like below 3, if you wanted to play that one, I would lay the points with Rice in that one. I lean to Cincinnati at home against Oklahoma. That's Cincinnati, their first year in the Big 12. They're opening, even though they did have an overtime game last week, but it was an overtime loss as like a double-digit favorite to Miami, Ohio. But Miami, Ohio's an in-state little brother to them in Ohio, so that was a big motivation game for Miami, Ohio. So Cincinnati is going to be a little bit undervalued, I think, in that one, plus 14 or wherever that number is right now. I would lean to Cincinnati against Oklahoma, and I think Oklahoma is going to be overvalued a bit in that one because they scored over 60-something points in 2 of their games, 66 and 73 or something like that. But they've kind of just been playing all bad teams so far. They haven't really played anyone of note, I don't think, or at least in the games where they scored a ton, they didn't. So lean to Cincinnati. In that one, I think the value is there. I kind of like Washington State, plus 3 at home against Oregon State. Oregon State's ranked somewhere around like 16, and it's like, what the hell have they done? It's just because they have Ukulele at quarterback, the Clemson transfer. Ukulele, my guy, man, Ukulele. He's the fat man's stringed instrument there, quarterback for Oregon State. Ukulele, I mean, he showed at Clemson, I think he just wasn't quite able to get the job done against like some of the better teams that they were playing, which is why he's now at Oregon State. You have like in college football, you have like the whole transfer portal situation now and the NIL stuff, and that kind of leads to like some of these guys like actually moving to like smaller schools for like more playing time, more like name recognition, even though he was playing a decent amount at Clemson. I think he was like their starter for quite a bit, but he's over there at Oregon State now. But Oregon State hasn't shown anything yet this year. They haven't played anybody, so I don't know what they've really done to deserve the 16 ranking. They were just ranked really high to start the season, and they haven't stubbed their toe yet. But Washington State's going to be the best team that they've faced so far. And Washington State, I think they beat Wisconsin as a home underdog a couple weeks ago, which is a pretty good win for them, pretty big win. They have a good quarterback over at Washington State. So that looks sus to me as well, that number. I like Washington State plus the 3 at home. And finally, I'll mention I like Charlotte plus 28 or wherever it is, 29. It's one of those big spreads, even though I know I won on a big spread game last week with Wyoming plus 30 or plus 30.5 or whatever it was. And this is kind of similar. This would be a fade of Florida because Florida just had a big game and they won at home in an upset, 6.5-point upset or so, or 5.5 maybe, over Tennessee, a ranked SEC team, one of the best SEC teams in my opinion. Tennessee, they're in the mix, I would say, even though they're ranked kind of in the 20s right now. I think they're a little bit better than that. That was a big win for Florida in a tough battle. Now Florida has to go play Charlotte, and I think they have more SEC after that. They play Kentucky, which it's still, an SEC team that's given them some battles in recent years, so that's a bigger game. So, yeah, I would fade Florida in that one as well. 28-point favorite in that one. So those are just some extra leans I'll just throw out there. But, yeah, the best plays one more time. Middle Tennessee State minus 3, Mississippi State plus 6.5, and Memphis plus 6.5 or plus 7. If you can get plus 7 on either of those, I would say do it. You can follow me, Tower Gang Toad, on Twitter. You can feel free to message me, ask me questions about games that I don't talk about. I probably will have some opinions on other games and whatever, so I have to because I'm in like pick'em pools and stuff too. So ask me questions, whatever. Maybe I'm just too much of a retard here, too much of an autist, and I don't do a good job describing things. Maybe I'm not funny enough on this show. Go ahead, man. Criticize my plays. Criticize how unfunny I am. Whatever. Send me the messages. Send me the comments. It's all right. I'll try to interact with you guys. And Tower Gang Toad, because I am one of the hosts of the Tower Gang podcast, the most offensive comedy podcast in existence. You can go follow us at Tower Gang Pod on Rumble, YouTube, Odyssey sometimes. YouTube, unless we get kicked off again, I guess. Spotify, our episodes go up. And you can support us on our locals, towergang.locals.com. I am Toad, Tower Gang Toad, better off dad, and I definitely am. Peace.